There was a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to underline something that you talked about earlier that I was talking with somebody, I forget who it was, just a couple days ago, having to do with the evolution of English. And you can see the class relation in the remaining words. So things that have to do with the higher orders of society get privilege, and the things that have to do with the natives, like basically the Anglo-Saxons, are considered lesser or derogatory. So as a consequence, the food you grow is not the food you eat. So the food you grow is a cow, ein Kuh, auf Deutsch, and then
from the old German.
From the old German, but you eat beef, which is the French. You grow swine, but you eat pork. And it goes all the way through. So you can have, in terms of sex, the crude is fuck, the Latinate is intercourse.
Right.
So there's there's the whole question of perception of terms through class lenses.
Absolutely. In fact, we can consider what went on in those 200 years under the Norman invasion as a kind of pidginization of German, all that clipping of inflections. And then once the Normans were kicked out of England, and England won those two great battles at Agincourt, with the long bow, and for the first time defeated the French, and they did not have to fear from the French. 50% of the vocabulary of English entered into English in that century, from Latin, from French, from Spanish, which means it became creolized, right? And you're right, the words that were in use from German became, because of their past, you were a subjugated people for those 200 years, became with lower prestige than the new, even though they anglicized the borrowings from Latin and French, they were not using them exactly. Nevertheless, those became the more prestigious forms of English, and to this day, they last that way. Absolutely. But again, that's one of those things that only a Labov could discover, because only a Labov cares about differences and variations, right?
Water. Don't forget, don't call the people yourself. Because we have all one of our professors is water. Professor Lothringer. I call Lothringer, but Lothringer is from this right from this Lothringer is okay.
A few points. Going back to Deleuze. First, this chapter on the postulates of linguistics, I think it has the first function, which is polemic. You took care of that when you refer to these kind of universals of Chomsky, etc. But there is an internal polemic to the French context, the theoretical context, but of course it came from Saussure. It was picked up and transformed by Lacan. It was part of the whole genome linguistics. Okay. But also it was transversal in relation to where Saussure came, because Saussure was coming after the German philologists. The German philologists were pretty close to what you were saying, that language change, but people are lazy, they take off the parcels that are not indispensable, but there was no attempt to account for it historically, or to account for it in terms of energetic, or to account for it in terms of the multiplicity of the factors that introduce the language. So they basically have a transversal version of both the formalization that Saussure did and what Saussure himself was reacting against, right? Okay. The second point is that there's the notion of performative, that the language is a command because it changes subjectivity, or the status of subjectivity. You were starting with a signifier for Lacan, and the signifier doesn't produce subjectivity, but it modifies subjectivity, it just climbs it, etc. But the same way not the same way, but in a comparable way, when Deleuze said that, talks about the incorporals, right? When he said when the judge declares, you are guilty, well, this is just language, but it's changed entirely the situation of the individual, his status, the whole relation has changed because the statement is being made. And I think this is the extreme point of what language does. if you use language and in fact you enter into a certain hierarchy, into a certain centralization of language, and the French always think that the French cash so much on language because the French had made a cult of the language from the very beginning, a power cult. It has imposed politically. There's a book called The Politics of Language. The first thing that the people did after while the revolution was happening was send messengers in all the provinces banning the dialects of that French from Paris and from the Jacobins who would prevail over the others. You know, because, as you said, the French of the North was at one point much stronger than the French of Paris. So all these historical variation you accounted for. Now, the third element is that when they talk about language command, especially for Botany, it's the fact that language itself has assumed all the functions of the law, right? But also that it eradicates all what sociologists call semiotics. The dance, the expression, the gesture, everything that makes a language more than a simple line, which is a command. And of course, they always emphasize that language has become like the universal, the reduction of all the polybosity of languages, which are not languages, but rather semiotic. And yes, there was a Russian, Lotman, and all these people were trying, and we are trying to also at semiotic at the beginning, remember, to account for linguistic from semiotic, not using linguistic and language as a model, but as one of the possible voices, involved. So the problem that they attack is the fact that the very fact of using language as a universal translator of any other languages is already a reduction, right? And then the fourth one is that you have, of course, you don't have to go to foreigners to find, to minor countries or languages. If you take Proust is a certain way of using the Baroque way, French, and reinventing France, the reverse, of course, etc. So language is permeated with these forces that make it something else than just the law, but it always ends up there. And what the approach linguistic language to have done is to just take the end product of all these multiplicities and just eradicate them and make as if they didn't exist. Right?
That's right. Yeah, no, you make very good points. I mean, they amplify on what I was saying. I didn't hear any contradiction.
There's another one which is Barthes, and it's very important for Guattari, because he said, well, language is command if it's like a statement, right? But when you're in a situation interlocution, then you anticipate the answer by changing, modifying your own language, so that there is there is no homogeneity in the transmission. It's not communication, but it's some sort of challenge to integrate the other was doing and to reflect it back, and so that language is not something static, but it's made of a multiplicity of voices even within that.
That's right. Absolutely, and you can see that in like rap, in hip hop, for instance, just rhyming, which brings, of course, the musical aspect of language, or even what I was saying before, where do you place the stress? Which can you place the stress in the first syllables, you end up eroding the last syllable. Well, stress is not properly speaking a linguistic phenomenon, it's an energetic phenomenon, right? So by bringing rhythm, rhyme, stress, and poets and musicians and so on, stressing the musicality of language, what they're doing is re-injecting it with something that it always had, but that the standardization of the academies slowly sucked the life out of them until they became these vehicles for communicating contents, as opposed to vehicles for doing, causing emotions in the audience, or vehicles for, convincing people, the rhetorical use of language where you're trying to persuade, and then you go on a rhythm and you go up in your tone and you come down. All those aspects of language which are left out by linguistics, Deleuze and Guattari want to bring them back on to really make language something that it is constantly becoming, as opposed to something that's frozen out of time.